Hello and welcome to my topic, the art and science of pricing. This is pricing in a small to medium business context. SMEs making up 99.7% of businesses. All right, so this is for a wide audience. So some people know quite a lot about pricing and some people are fairly unaware of it as an independent business tool or strategy. So bear with me while I go right through to start with the basics to more advanced topics. All right, let's get started. In business, it's very easy to lose money and it's hard to make money. And I represented that idea with a guy climbing a very slippery, muddy hill, right? It's really easy to slide down and really hard to make progress upwards. Just why is that? Well, if you think about it, your costs are locked in, right? You take on employees, you've got a salary to pay every fortnight or every month. You've got a lease on your premises maybe. Again, that rent, that lease has got to be paid every month. But your sales aren't locked in. There's nothing certain about your sales. So if sales don't happen, those costs still happen. Kind of like sliding back down the hill. I liken it to a vehicle with 1 forward gear and 9 reverse gears. Take the example of a service business, right, that makes, say, a 10% net profit. So they charge $200 an hour for their services. So each hour is ultimately making $20 of net profit, right? Well, if you don't work for an hour that you expected to work or you'd budgeted to work, it costs the business $180 because those costs still happen. Now you have to bill another 9 hours just to break even for the hour that you didn't bill. Now you can always work on your weekends or something to try and make it up, right? But who wants to do that long term? And even when you did bill the extra 9 hours just to break even, you still didn't make any profit. There's no reprieve for product businesses either. In a given time period, if you don't sell your widget, the overheads still happen, right? Your warehouse, your costs, staff and so on still happen. And you never get that chance again. So when you have an opportunity to make money, you need to make a lot. Okay, and pricing is one of your tools. And I would argue it's one of your most important tools. A couple of definitions. Price is what you sell your products and services for, and cost is what you pay for the raw materials, the labor, and so on to make your product or deliver your service. So here's a little spreadsheet I have, and look, if you contact me, I can give you a copy. This is an imaginary little company where we sell things for $50 each. We sell 100 of them per, let's say it's per day, which brings in a total income of, say, $5,000 per day, right? 50 times 100. Now, supposing these things that we sell are $30 each, so our cost of sales is $3,000. So, and 3,000, of course, 30 times 100 of them, $3,000. 5,000 minus 3,000 is 2,000. That's our gross profit. But say we have costs of $1,500 a day for staff, warehouse, and so on. That leaves us with a net profit of 500. Now, let's supposing I change just one thing. I just change the price we sell it for. I've put the price up by $5. So the dollar change is $5, the percentage change is 10%. Look what happens to the profit. It's doubled. Right, we've gone from $500 to $1,000. It's a 100% increase. So we can change, and you can play with the spreadsheet. I can send you a copy. But we can change any of price, volume, cost per item or expenses overhead by 10% better. So price would be up, volume would be up, cost would be down, expenses would be down. And you can see how the profit changes. And you can see quite clearly that profit makes a big difference, a bigger difference than anything else. Similarly, if we're going backwards, if we make any of those four things 10% worse, price is still impacted the most. Right? 10% in a business that makes a 10% net profit, a decrease of your price by 10% makes a 100% decrease in your profit. That completely wipes out your profit. Nothing is quite as bad. Which raises the question, do you want to compete on price? Often called the race to the bottom. I sort of feel that the only time you would consider competing on price is if you have some secret ingredient. Army of Oompa Loompas, for example, that work for you for free. That enable you to sell that no one else has got, of course. That would enable you to sell on price. Otherwise, for most people, most businesses, you don't want to compete on price. Next, I have a theory. I call it Mark's theory. Most SMEs, I believe, have not modeled their business. That means that they haven't created a little spreadsheet which says, look, if I sell this many and I pay this much for them, or this many hours, or I provide this many services or different jobs or projects or whatever, my costs are this. Here is the profit I'm likely to make at the end. What they do instead is they look at competitors and say, well, what are they charging? I should charge the same. But here's the thing. The competitors have made the same mistake. They haven't modelled their business. That means that everybody is struggling. It's crazy. All right, next point. Who do you want to work for? Do you want to work for poor customers or rich customers? Let me explain. Poor customers have limited disposable income, so they're price sensitive. On the other hand, rich customers have more disposable income. They're not price sensitive. They care instead about things like risk. Are you going to do the job that you said you were going to do? Time, how long will it take? How fast can you react? And effort. How much effort on their part is going to be involved in them having to engage with you? Netflix works for poor customers. They spend $17 billion on content. I think that number is a couple of years old. They charge you $17.99 a month, right? They can work for poor customers because they've got this massive scale. SMEs, by definition, don't have massive scale. All right, summary so far. So we've agreed maybe that you need to make a lot of money when you can. Number 2, price is the most impactful factor. Number 3, your competitors are probably undercharging. And number 4, poor customers are price sensitive. So as an SME, what's going to be your strategy? Well, here's a possible strategy. Be the premium offering. In other words, charge more than most of your competitors. Do things that rich customers, or customers with lots of money, lots of spare money, care about. And sometimes it's the little things that makes the big difference. Quick notes about charging by the hour. The problem with charging, I did it for years. It's a bad idea. The problem is lots of write-offs, right? You take too long, you've got to write some hours off. Customer whinges about something taking too long, you write hours off. Someone makes a mistake, you've got to do rework, you've got to write a lot of hours off. Not much opportunity to write on. You know, you're not going to go to the customer and say, hey, we did this really good job for you and look, it was such good work. I'm going to charge you 2 hours when I only took 1. It's not going to fly, right? The other problem with charging by the hour is your rate gets compared with competitors. And if we go with Mark's theory, competitors aren't charging enough. So it becomes a bit of a game. You know, when the job blows out, the customers are going to be unhappy. But just a note, if your business does charge by the hour, and say you've got, 8 or so employees, maybe you're charging out about 10,000 hours a year. if you increase your price by just $10 an hour, $100,000 goes straight to your bottom line, right? Because you don't have to buy any more stuff, right? You don't pay any more overheads. Makes the point about how impactful price is. Another potential strategy is upsell. Segment your market. Sell cheaper products to those who won't pay anymore. Sell more expensive items to those who value them and are happy to pay. Here's an example from a coffee shop. It's probably far too small to read, but here's your prices of coffee. It's $4 for a small and $4.50 for a large, but there's a whole bunch of extras down here and fancier mockers and so on, right? That way the people who won't pay any more than $4 for a coffee, they still get them as a customer, but the people who are quite happy to pay more, there's plenty of options. So you don't miss out on that extra margin. I mean, hey, marshmallows, 50 cents, right? How much does it cost a marshmallow cost them, right? What, 2 cents? Lots of margin. Here is one of my favorite tips, one of two. Trade items of unequal value. What the customer values is not the same as your cost, right? So you do a bunch of things, right? They all have costs. But you're doing something for the customer. How the customer values that is not necessarily even slightly related to the cost of doing it. Let me give you an example. Let's supposing that you sell 4 things, A, B, C, D. Okay? A costs you 10, B costs you 30, C costs you 3, and D costs you 15. So your cost is 58. So you go, okay, well, 10, well, I'm going to mark it up a bit, so I'm going to sell it for 12. Item B, I'm going to sell it for 10% more, 33. Item C, well, I can add a whole dollar onto that. That's like a 33% markup at $4. But it's only a small margin of only $1 compared to $3 and $2. Item D, add a bit on. When I add it all together, I make 66. 66 minus 58 means I make 8, or I hope to make 8. Okay. But unbeknownst to us, the customer values item A at, let's say 12, which is pretty much what we're pricing it at, fine. They really don't value item B. It's a really expensive thing for you to do, but they don't value it. In fact, they value it at less than it costs you, right? Item C is incredibly valuable to you. You'd be surprised at how so often little things are really valuable to the customer. And so in this example, customer really values item C. And item D they also value quite a lot more than you're happy to charge. This is all going on in the customer's head, right? Here. So you say to the customer, okay, so item A is 12, and they go, well, I value that, that's fine. Item B is a 33. Remember, you're trying to sell for 33. And the customer goes, really, 33? Because remember, the customer's thinking, I only value that at 28. So you haggle, and look, you're not prepared to sell it for less than it's costing you, so you sell it for 30, right? Item C, you say to the customer, 4, customer thinks, wow, that's great. That's what great value, right? Because customer's thinking, I'd be prepared to say 16. He's only selling it for 4. Item D is saying 17. Well, the customer values it more highly at 20, so going to pay that. So you end up charging them 63, which is only $5 more than 58, right? So you only made 5. But potentially you could have made 18 if you knew how the customer valued those different things. So what can you do about it? Well, one option is to bundle them. So here's a graphical representation of the same point. So this time I've started with only 3 items. I've got items A, B, and C. But you price them, and A is pretty much the same as A. B, you price much less than the customer values it at. Item C, you price it at slightly more than the customer values at. What you end up selling is A, B, and C, and the customer is only paying for C what they value it at. So this is how much you make or you sell for. But if you bundle them, you could potentially sell for a whole lot more, still less than the customer's values the 3 items together. So there's a gap there, right? But it's way more than you would have got. Okay, another point, another strategy, annuity income. A buying decision is emotionally painful. So hit them only once. For example, charge them the same amount every month if it's a service, ongoing service, rather than a variable amount. Because if it's a different amount every month, your invoice has got to come across their desk once a month for them to check it and go, ouch. A customer made a joke once that receiving my bill was like being run over by a sedan. And occasionally, it was like being run over by a truck. If you charge them the same amount every month, then once they get over the first bill, they hand it over to the accounts department, accounts payable. If it's the same amount every month, they just pay it and they don't see it. Call-out fee. A client who was charging his customers a call-out fee, it was about $110. He said the customers hate call-out fees. But after some discussion, we decided we needed to keep the call-out fee. So I said, great, charge them $150. Because the emotional pain between $110 and $150 is no different. If they're going to hate it, let's just make some money out of it, right? Maintenance. Maintenance on some product that they bought. Small amount, but you trickle away every single month. Over time, over lots of customers, it really adds up. And it's kind of invisible. Here's one of my favourite little ditties. Turnover is vanity. Profit is sanity. Cash is reality. And discounting is profanity. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't like discounting. And I think you can see why, now that we've done that exercise where you see what price does to profit. 10% discount of your price, 100% knocked off your profit, potentially. But there are times to discount. Let's talk about them. You know, I had a client who told me that he'd given a large customer of his a 10% discount ongoing. After about 3 or 4 years of working for them, he'd worked out he'd done $3 million worth of business. And I was meeting with the customer one day, and he mentioned the discount. And they were completely unaware. That means he'd given away $300,000 of pure net profit, and they didn't appreciate it. Have a think about that next time you discount. However, if you must discount, here's my rule number 1. The discount must not damage the perceived value of your products or services. Now, most people know this, but it's worth reminding ourselves. And I'll throw in at this point the golden rule of business: always trade something for something. If you want something, fine, what do I get? Swap something for something. They don't have to be equal value. Trade items of equal to unequal value, right? But there's always something for something. So here's some times from the point of view of your costs that it's probably okay to discount. Provided, of course, keep in mind rule 1, right? When you have spare capacity, sunk costs. In other words, you've already spent the money on something. Think an airline, right? Flying a plane. They've got enough passengers on the plane to pay for the flight. There's a few extra seats. The incremental cost, the additional cost of putting someone in those seats is, a cup of tea and a bicky and a bit of extra fuel, right? So they can sell those seats much more cheaply. Standby fares, for example, or bought in advance, or you can't change it, that kind of thing. They're trading something for something. Yes, you get a cheaper seat, but you've got to give up something. If someone comes in and buys more than they came for, so they came in and bought something, you could give them another one at a discount. Okay. Why? How does that help you? It helps you because, remember, time is cost. So if you get more gross profit in the same unit of time, you make more profit. Buy large quantities, of course, that's a classic one. Acquiring your customer has a cost. So once they've walked in the door, you really want to maximize that value. Commit to a long-term contract. Proves the value of your business. I was very fond of signing in long 3-year contracts. I had most of my clients on 3-year contracts as a service. Give you a referral. Hey, I'll give you a discount. Give me a referral. Or 3. So pricing. It's psychology. It's so much psychology. And here's the thing. It's your psychology as business owner as well as your customers. It's really important to remember that your psychology could be holding back your business from a pricing point of view as much as your customers. Here's an interesting one. Anchoring. What are they comparing the price to? I play a little game here often with an audience, and I say, what is the population of Bangladesh? Is it greater or less than 35 million? And what is it? And I said, look, if you absolutely know this, then keep quiet. Go from your general knowledge. And you hear numbers like, 30 million, 50 million, 40 million, 28 million. You tell them the answer. It's 175 million. They weren't even close. So why did they guess numbers around 35 million? Because I said 35 million. It's a well-established psychological trick, if you like, called anchoring. So often they don't know what your price should be. And sometimes you're prepared to pay way more than you think. So what have they anchored to? But this works in reverse as well, right? This works as much to your psychology as to theirs, because you know the cost of your service. Have you anchored your price to that cost? Next idea, reframing. Here's an example. Talk about their turnover. Now, we know that turnover is generally a big number, right? It's the total number of dollars in the door. Then talk about the price of your product or service. That turnover is going to be a big number. It puts your price in perspective. Say business coaching. So you're a $1 million business, you want to be a $3 million business. Well, you've got a $2 million problem, haven't you? The price for business coach now vanishes into insignificance. Your cost now looks a lot smaller. More examples of reframing. Talk about the ongoing cost of the burden, or the cost of the burden of the problem that they're wanting you to solve. How much would this issue cost your business each year if it doesn't get resolved? Or if your solution is preventing a problem. If there's a fire, what will be the cost impact to your business? Then talk about the cost of your products and services, which now look a whole lot smaller in the context of these other costs. It works. A friend of mine left the government Department of Public Prosecution, so she's a government worker, to set herself up as a barrister in the private sector. So she has to get clients, right? Not many clients hired her at first, and then a fellow barrister suggested that her prices were too cheap. She put them up, and the work poured in. She's a very successful barrister for many years, and she's now a judge. Someone else shared a story where they were putting in a lawn, and they got one cost for $2,000, another for $4,000, another $8,000. He chose the $8,000 cost because he figured it must be better. Price is a signal for quality for many people. Oh, my other favourite, decoy pricing. Give them 3 choices. One is cheap or low cost, right? But you don't get much. The middle one is a reasonable cost, so but good bang for your buck. And one more that's expensive, that costs a lot more, You get more for your buck. You get more bang, but a lot more bucks. People don't necessarily buy cheap. They buy smart. And the expensive item is a decoy, right, to get people to buy your middle choice. You'll notice that Apple, for example, when you buy an iPhone, they will have 3 choices, sometimes even 4. At least one of them will be a decoy. Here's another example. Customer wanted downlights. They know they can get cheap downlights from Bunnings or similar for $25. The electrician hates them because there's very little margin in them. There are lots of quality, reliability problems with them. They're usually having to come back after a few months because 1 or 2 of them have stopped working and so on. The Sparky says to the customer, look, I've got much better ones for $80, and describes the benefits. Made in Germany, they're really high quality, the light quality is much better, better for your eyes, less glare, etc., etc., etc. Much nicer fitting. Customer goes, oh, I love these more expensive downlights, but man, from $25 to $80, that's a big jump. Sparky then says, well, I have these $60 ones, which are really pretty much as good as the $80 ones, right? The difference is trivial. Well, customers delighted because they can get downlights for only $60 that are pretty much as good as the $80 ones. Which one was a decoy? Business news, local paper, local business paper, digital only $25, print only $100, digital and print $110. Which one's the decoy? The print only. It's not necessarily the most expensive one. That is the decoy. It's the middle one in this case, right? So why, if you're going to spend $100, you might as well spend 110, get the online as well. Importantly, limit detail when you're quoting price. List all the good stuff they're going to receive. List all the extra things that you're going to do for no additional cost. Describe the features and benefits. Describe what problem they're going to solve. But don't put in things there that the customer doesn't value, like travel, project or service management, administration, anything they don't see value in. Now, there are always exceptions. A big business, if they insist on paying very little for the thing they're buying from you, then load up the price with other stuff. But if they don't care about that other stuff, what are they really getting? Charge them for that, not for the things that you have to do to get there. The GP method. This has been used successfully in a number of places, particularly where you have a product and service mix. You don't care whether you make the money as a margin on the products or you make it from the service. So work out your gross profit on the materials, the products, then add the service price. Now, depending on the client, you could charge more for the materials and less for the service, or more for the service and less for the materials, depending on how the customer perceives value. Example the other night was the landscaper selling plants. Sometimes the customer is going to be comparing the price of your plants to how cheaply they can get it from a really cheap nursery that provides rubbishy product, in which case you could list your product your plants very cheaply, but then load all of the gross profit that you want to make onto your service, or the other way around. Either way, what matters in a small business, most businesses, is gross profit. And by the way, this is a great way to set sales targets for your sales staff. So there you have it, pricing. It is critically important. Have a think about some of these ideas and what they can do for your business. I'm Mark Jackson. Thanks for listening.